I trusted my sister with the keys to my home. My name is Martha, 53, and after my husband passed, my world grew quiet. Claire moved closer, saying she wanted to help me manage the house and the small savings that kept the lights on. I believed her. The porch became our shared space every morning, coffee steaming, bills spread across the table, laughter softening the loss that lingered between us. The smell of toast drifted from the kitchen, and sunlight rested on the old ledger we used to track expenses. For a while, it felt safe again, like family could still be enough. Those mornings were my anchor. We talked about repainting the fence, about how much paint would cost, and which color would hide the cracks best. She said she'd handle the bank deposit from the rent payments. "You rest, Martha," she'd tell me, taking the envelope with a smile. Trust was simple then. I didn't count the bills. I just believed they'd reach where they belonged. Maybe that was my mistake. One afternoon, as the clock struck 11, I noticed a receipt missing from the folder. It was for the roof repair, $1,600 paid in cash. I asked Claire about it while she stirred sugar into her tea. She laughed, said I must have misplaced it. "You always keep too many papers," she teased. But the way she avoided my eyes stayed with me. Something small but sharp cut through that easy rhythm we shared. I told myself not to overthink it. Families misplace things, right? Still, I started copying every page of the ledger. It felt unnecessary then, but my fingers trembled as I pressed the papers flat against the scanner. The hum of the machine filled the kitchen, steady, mechanical, louder than my heartbeat. It was like documenting trust before it disappeared. That night, I sat by the window watching the porch light flicker. The air carried the scent of rain and dust. I wondered if my husband would have caught it sooner, the subtle tilt in her tone when she spoke about handling things. I'd given her too much, access to the safe, to the account, to the house itself. I wanted help, not control. I didn't see how those lines were already blurring. At sunrise, I brewed coffee again and waited for her to arrive. I told her I'd start handling the bills myself. She smiled too quickly. "Of course, whatever makes you comfortable," she said, reaching for the keys I'd left on the counter. My stomach turned as I watched her close her hand around them. Maybe it was nothing, but maybe it was everything. The porch felt colder after she left. I stared at the worn grain of the table where her cup still sat, ringed with a faint circle of coffee. Trust leaves marks, even when it fades. That morning I wrote in my notebook, "Make your own copies. Keep them safe." I didn't realize I'd just drawn the first line in a quiet war. The next day, I went to file the new ledger copy, but the drawer already looked different, neater, emptier. My hand brushed against an envelope tucked behind the folders. Inside was a handwritten note in her careful script. "Don't worry about the rest. I've got it covered." The words should have comforted me, but something about them felt final, like she was already managing more than she should. As the morning light filled the kitchen, I looked around at the walls we'd painted together. They were still warm, still mine. Yet for the first time, I wondered what she really meant by help. The copy I made wasn't the same as hers. Her version had my name erased. When the clerk slid the papers across the counter, I felt my chest tighten. My own handwriting, gone. In its place, a neat, perfect signature that wasn't mine. I rubbed my thumb over the page. The ink was too fresh, the paper still rough from printing. I said, "This can't be right." The clerk frowned and muttered, "Looks like it's still in review." His tone made it sound like nothing unusual, but my heart knew better. By late morning, I drove home with the papers clutched so hard they wrinkled in my grip. The steering wheel felt slick from my palms. Every mile home replayed the same question. How could she do this? Claire had managed every form, every call with the realtor, every bank letter that arrived after my husband passed. I'd let her. She said handling the paperwork made her feel useful, that I'd done enough grieving. I believed her, because believing was easier than doubting. The house felt different when I walked in. The air held that faint smell of printer ink, metallic and stale. I sat at the kitchen table, comparing the copies side by side. Mine had my name. Hers didn't. The difference was only a few letters, but it meant everything. When the clock hit 6, I called her. She answered on the second ring, cheerful as always. "Hey, you sound tense," she said. "I just came from the clerk's office," I replied. "They showed me a title copy with your handwriting where my name used to be." A pause. Then her tone shifted. Sweet, slow, deliberate. "You always panic over nothing, Martha." My throat tightened. "This isn't nothing." "You know your memory's not what it used to be," she said softly. "You probably signed something months ago and forgot." I pressed my hand against the table, steadying myself. "Don't do that," I whispered. "Do what?" "Make me doubt what I know." She sighed. "You should rest. I'll come by tomorrow." Then she hung up. The silence that followed felt heavier than any sound. The fridge hummed behind me, the only proof that time still moved forward. I sat there for a while, tracing the edge of the forged page. I could feel where the paper fibers had buckled under the fake signature. It was proof, not of ownership, but of betrayal. Money always changes hands before truth does. That thought stayed with me as I pulled out the drawer and locked the paper inside. I'd worked too long, saved too carefully, to lose the only home that still carried his memory. I remember saying out loud, "She won't touch it again." My voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone preparing for battle. Outside, dusk painted the walls in gold. The light reminded me of the family photos lined up along the hallway, smiles frozen, arms linked, a version of us that never existed. I used to dust those frames every Sunday, pretending care could hold time still. Now I saw them differently, like witnesses who'd stayed quiet too long. The next morning, I opened my account to check if the mortgage payment had cleared. It hadn't. The auto draft Claire set up months ago had been canceled. I swallowed hard. It wasn't just the title. She was cutting off my footing, one paper at a time. I whispered to myself, "You're not crazy." Saying it felt necessary, like marking a border. I folded the copy of the deed and tucked it under a stack of old letters, hidden but close enough to reach. I'd built my life on trust once. But that day, holding that forged title in my shaking hands, I understood that trust could be erased too, clean as ink on fresh paper. She'd already listed my house online. I saw my living room on the internet. The screen glare hit my eyes as I leaned closer. There it was. My couch, my curtains, the chipped corner of the coffee table I'd meant to fix for months. The photo was too clean, too staged. Under it, the listing read, "Owner relocating soon. Quick sale. Reduced price." The date showed last week. I hadn't agreed to sell. My breath caught in my throat. My own home, my only safety, had become someone else's transaction. I scrolled again, searching for a mistake. The agent's name blinked at the bottom. Mark, my husband's old friend. The same man who came to the funeral with flowers and a business card saying, "If you ever need help with property, you call me." I hadn't called him. Claire must have. She had access to every file, every spare key. My chest tightened. She'd written my future in fine print, without asking. At noon, the sun poured through the blinds, painting the floor in sharp lines. I watched the pattern move, slower than time itself. I whispered, "She can't do this," but she already had. The comments below the post made it worse, strangers debating my price, my worth, my memories. One wrote, "Nice deal for a corner lot." Another said, "Looks like an estate transfer." They were wrong. I was still alive. That night, I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked past 11, then midnight. I grabbed my car keys and drove toward her house, parking half a block away. The porch light was on. I saw her standing there with Mark, laughing, holding a glass of wine. The sight hollowed me. She wasn't helping me. She was selling me out piece by piece. I whispered into the darkness, "You don't betray blood." But even as I said it, the words felt old, something my mother used to say before she lost her home to a cousin's deceit. History was repeating itself, only this time I was the fool. When I confronted her the next morning, she acted innocent. "You're misunderstanding, Martha. It's just a valuation listing," she said. "Then why is it marked pending?" I asked. She looked away. It's how the system works. Mark said it helps attract offers. You mean buyers, I snapped. She smiled, calm as stone. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Her words landed like a shove. Harder? It wasn't hard. It was cruel. My hands trembled as I pointed toward my house. That's mine. You can't sell what isn't yours. She tilted her head. It's ours, technically. You let me manage the documents, remember? I did remember. I remembered every signature she insisted I make when I was too tired to read the fine print. I spent the rest of the day pacing my living room, the same one now posted online for strangers to imagine owning. The walls felt closer. The air carried the faint scent of dust and old paint, like the house itself was holding its breath. I opened my old checkbook, flipping through deposits and withdrawals, rent payments, maintenance fees, the balance shrinking faster than I'd realized. Every financial trail led back to her. The thought made my stomach twist. She wasn't just stealing my home, she was rewriting my life with numbers. I tried calling Mark. He didn't pick up. When he finally texted back, it was short. Claire said you're reconsidering. Paperwork's already moving. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Paperwork. Moving. Words meant to sound harmless but filled with endings. I drove past the agency later that afternoon. Her car was parked outside. Through the window, I saw her leaning over his desk, laughing again. She looked happy, too happy for someone caught in a lie. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. You're not taking this from me, I said under my breath. The line between love and hate had never felt thinner. That night, as I returned home, the wind carried something sharp and new. A creak of metal, a hollow thud. I stepped closer and saw it. A white wooden board planted at the edge of my lawn. Black letters across it read, "For sale." The next morning, I stood on the porch barefoot, dew soaking into my skin, staring at that sign. The same porch where I'd once shared coffee with her, talking about family and trust. Now, trust was nailed into the ground like an open wound. Next morning, the for sale board was on my lawn. The board went up before sunrise. I saw it when I opened the curtains, white wood, black letters, staked right into my lawn. For sale. I froze. The air was still gray, the kind of quiet that makes you think the world hasn't woken yet. Except mine already had. My stomach dropped as I stepped outside in my robe, bare feet cold against the dew. The sign leaned slightly forward, as if eager to announce what I never agreed to. Helen's voice came from the other side of the fence, soft but certain. Men came around 5, she whispered. Said it's a pre-sale step. Thought you'd moved. Moved? I said, choking on the word. This is my house. She bit her lip. They sounded official. I yanked the board from the ground, hands shaking. The post splintered, cutting my palm, but I didn't stop. I dragged it to the porch and dropped it with a thud. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned the birds. At 6:30, I called Claire. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. By 8, she showed up in her neat blazer, holding a paper cup of coffee like she was walking into a meeting. "You're up early," she said lightly. "What is this?" I pointed to the board. She blinked once, then smiled. "Oh, that? The realtor must have mixed up the addresses. I'll have him fix it." "Then call him now," I said. She hesitated just long enough to tell me the truth. "He's probably busy. Don't make a scene." I laughed, sharp and hollow. "A scene? Someone just tried to sell my life and you think I care about a scene?" Her face hardened. "You're overreacting again, Martha. You always do this." I stepped closer. "Don't lie to me." She turned away, pretending to inspect the porch railing. "You really should repaint this place before it loses more value." That line hit harder than a slap. Value. That's all it was to her. Dollars, not memories. My voice dropped. "You changed the locks, didn't you?" She didn't answer. At 9, I drove to the agency office. The receptionist avoided my eyes. Mark came out from the back, tie loosened, expression tight. "Morning," he muttered. "I want every file frozen," I said. He cleared his throat. It's complicated, Mrs. Hayes. The listing's in a pending state. Pending on what? He lowered his voice. Claire said you were relocating. The paperwork's clean. If there's been a misunderstanding, I'll look into it. My pulse raced. Look into it fast, I said, or I'll bring someone who will. He nodded, but his eyes darted away. The lie sat heavy between us. I left the office and drove home under the harsh noon sun, the sign still lying on my porch like a corpse. By afternoon, the neighborhood had caught the scent of scandal. From one porch to the next, whispers spread. Did you hear? Claire's sister's losing the house. I thought she moved already. Poor thing. Each voice chipped at what little pride I had left. I stayed indoors, blinds drawn, trying to breathe through the humiliation. At 2, I wrote a short notice on plain white paper. To all concerned, this property is under personal dispute. No sale or transfer authorized. I signed it and dropped it off at the realtor's front desk, leaving copies with the county clerk. My hand trembled as I slid the last envelope across the counter. It wasn't much, but it was something. A thin paper shield between me and the woman trying to erase me. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty space where the board had stood. The faint sound of kids playing somewhere nearby reminded me how small and exposed this street could feel. My phone buzzed. A message from Claire. You didn't have to embarrass me like that. I typed back, you didn't have to steal from me. Then, I deleted it. Some fights aren't worth giving her the satisfaction of seeing. As the sun started to drop, orange light spilled through the blinds, catching the dust in the air. It was quiet. Too quiet. I walked to the front door, tried the handle, and felt my stomach twist. The key wouldn't turn. I tried again. It jammed. I checked the spare under the mat. Same result. That was when I knew. She'd crossed the final line. My home wasn't safe anymore. By sunset, my locks no longer worked. My own key didn't fit the door. At first, I thought I was holding the wrong one. I tried again, twisting harder. The metal scraped inside the lock, stubborn and cold. I tried the spare from under the mat, then the one on the old keychain I kept for emergencies. None of them turned. My pulse started to climb, slow and sharp. I whispered to myself, no, she wouldn't. But she had. The morning air was damp, and my breath clouded as I leaned against the porch post. I looked through the window, furniture still there, curtains drawn, everything mine but suddenly out of reach. I knocked once, twice. No answer. The silence on the other side was crueler than any word she could have said. I called her, straight to voicemail. Then I texted, "Did you change the locks?" Her reply came minutes later. "Just securing things until we talk." I stared at the message, the way she'd written "we," like it was still something mutual. I drove to the police station by 10. The officer behind the desk looked young enough to be my son. I explained, voice trembling but steady enough to make sense. "It's my house. My name's on the documents. My sister changed the locks." He sighed, already tired. "That's a civil matter, ma'am. We can't intervene unless there's forced entry or violence." "So you're saying I can't get into my own house?" He hesitated, then slid a form toward me. "You can file a complaint. It'll be documented." I filled it out with shaking hands. The pen left small dots of ink where I pressed too hard. Name, date, address, everything that made my life official. I handed it back, and he stamped it with a dull thud. The sound hit harder than expected. Proof, but powerless proof. As I walked out, the smell of coffee from the waiting area followed me to the parking lot. I sat in my car, hands flat on the steering wheel, eyes on the empty seat beside me. For the first time, I realized there was nowhere to go. Hotels wanted deposits, and the money I'd kept for property taxes had already gone missing from the shared account. She'd cut off more than locks. She'd cut off my ground to stand on. By sundown, the temperature dropped. I parked near the park across from my house and watched from a distance. The porch light was on. Through the curtain gap, I saw her shadow moving inside, slow and deliberate. She was home, in my home. My throat ached with the kind of anger that has nowhere to go. Around 9, I pulled my coat tighter and tried calling again. "Claire, this is insane," I said into the voicemail. "You've crossed a line. Give me the key back." I didn't finish the rest. The part where I wanted to scream, the part that wanted to beg. I hung up before I could sound broken. When the engine's heat finally faded, I leaned the seat back and closed my eyes. The hum of cars passing on the road was the only rhythm left in my life. I pressed the folded complaint form against my chest. The paper crinkled, thin but real, the only proof that someone had heard me, even if no one cared. At 11 p.m., I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, you start over." The promise felt small, but it kept me from breaking completely. By dawn, the chill inside the car made my fingers numb. I drove straight to the station again, handed in the completed form, and asked for a stamped copy. The officer nodded and said, "We'll file it." That was all. No questions, no comfort, just process. Still, it mattered. I stopped at the diner afterward, ordered the cheapest breakfast on the menu, and stared at my phone. No new messages. I scrolled through old ones, photos of the house before she moved in to help, texts from her saying she'd handle the mortgage paperwork. I'd trusted those words like they were family scripture. As I paid the bill, I noticed the small bruise on my palm where the lock had cut me. It throbbed every time I flexed my hand, like a pulse reminding me I was still here. Outside, the street shimmered with early sunlight. I took a deep breath and said under it, "You can't erase me." It wasn't defiance yet, just survival dressed as courage. My phone buzzed just as I reached the car. The message preview read, "Her lawyer called me before noon. He said I had signed a sales agreement. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "Mrs. Hayes, our records show your consent from 3 months ago," he said. I gripped the phone tighter. "That's impossible," I told him. "I never signed anything." He sighed like someone who'd had this argument 100 times before. "I'll send you a copy. You'll see it matches your file." Minutes later, the email arrived. I opened the attachment, and my own name stared back at me. Only it wasn't mine. The signature curved too smoothly, like someone practicing confidence. I printed it out, the paper still warm under my hand. The ink looked darker than it should. There was even a notary seal stamped in the corner. I checked the date. 3 months ago. That week I was in the hospital for a heart check. My mind reeled. Someone had used that time to steal my house in plain daylight. I called the lawyer back. "Who authorized this?" He paused, polite but distant. "The documentation shows Claire as the family co-signer. It's all in order." "In order?" I said, my voice breaking. "You're telling me my home was sold while I was in a hospital bed?" "I'm just the intermediary," he replied softly. "Any dispute has to go through civil court." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. The paper slipped from my fingers and landed on the table. The sound felt final. I sat there staring at the curve of that forged name, my name, realizing how easy it was for someone to erase me with ink. At noon, I drove into town and stopped by the copy shop to make duplicates. I needed proof before anything disappeared. The man behind the counter said, "Looks official. Real estate?" I nodded. Too real. That evening, I found Ruth's number in one of my husband's old address books. She used to be a notary before she retired. When she answered, her voice was warm, steady, like the world hadn't changed as much as it had. "Ruth, it's Martha. I need help." "What kind of help?" "I think someone forged my signature. You used to work with David, my husband. You'd know the old seal they used on the deeds." "Bring it over," she said. "I still have the registry from those years." Her kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and paper. The light above her table flickered once before holding steady. She took the contract from my hands, adjusting her glasses. "Let's see what they've done to you." She traced the seal with her thumb, frowning. "This isn't mine. And it's not any notary I know. The spacing's wrong. See this curve? That's from a digital stamp, not an emboss." I felt a mix of anger and relief. So it's fake. Completely. And the signature. She paused. That's a photocopy overlay. Sloppy, but good enough to fool anyone who doesn't look close. I exhaled, my body finally remembering to breathe. Will you testify if I need you to? She nodded. Of course. Your husband helped me save my home once. I haven't forgotten. For a moment, silence filled the room. The hum of her refrigerator became the only sound. She poured me tea and pushed the cup across the table. You need to stay calm, she said. Keep every document. Start building a trail. Don't let her see you panic. I stared at the envelope the lawyer had mailed earlier that day, still sitting unopened in my purse. She already knows I'm panicking, I said quietly. Ruth smiled, small and certain. Then stop letting her win. As I left her house, the evening air carried the faint sound of wind through trees. It reminded me of the nights when Claire and I were kids, whispering secrets in the dark, promising we'd never turn against each other. That promise meant nothing now. At home, or what was left of the idea of home, I spread the documents across the car seat under the porch light. The seal glimmered faintly, just enough to mock me. Proof, I thought. Finally, something solid. Something that wasn't gaslighting or denial. I folded Ruth's written note and slipped it inside the envelope. The weight of that paper felt heavier than anything I'd held in months. For the first time, I had something that could fight back. I looked up at the darkened windows of my house, the place where my life used to breathe. I whispered, "You can steal walls, not truth." The words steadied me. Ruth had said one last thing before I left her kitchen. Her eyes had narrowed, the way people look when they already know what's coming. "Be careful, Martha," she'd said. "They'll hit back harder now." A brick hit my car window that night. The sound was sharp and final, like something snapping inside me. I ducked instinctively, hands over my face as shards scattered across the seat. My breath came out uneven, and the quiet that followed made it worse. I looked around the empty street, no movement, no headlights, just the faint hum of a distant truck somewhere down the block. Then I saw it, a brick resting on the passenger seat, tied with a rubber band around a folded piece of paper. I unwrapped it carefully. The note said 2 words. Drop it. The handwriting was too neat to be random. My fingers trembled, the small cuts from the glass stinging as I held it closer to the streetlight. Whoever sent it wanted me scared, and it worked, at least for a moment. Then something in me hardened. It was just past midnight. I called the police again. Same station, same weary voice. The officer recognized me. "Ma'am, unless there's damage beyond property or a direct threat to your safety, we can only file it as vandalism." "There was a note," I said. "What kind of note?" "One that told me to stop looking for justice." He sighed. "Well, there's no witness, no camera. You can file a statement if you want." I gave him the details anyway. When he arrived 30 minutes later, he barely looked at the car before filling out the form. "You said you've had issues with your sister?" "She's the one who forged my name. This isn't random." He shrugged. "That's for civil court to decide. For now, I'll mark it as criminal mischief." Criminal mischief. The phrase tasted wrong. My home was stolen, my signature faked, my car attacked, and it was mischief. I wanted to scream, but instead said, "Can you at least take the brick?" He glanced at it. "Keep it. Could be useful for your lawyer." Then he left. I sat in the silence that followed, watching the porch lights flicker in the distance. Every sound made me flinch, the creak of a gate, the thud of a door. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was the realization that I was truly alone in this fight. By 1 a.m., I swept the glass from the seat using an old envelope. Each tiny piece caught the light before falling away. The smell of rain drifted through the open window. I tried to calm my breathing, reminding myself that panic was what they wanted. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The next morning, I called Ruth. She answered on the second ring. "What happened?" "They sent a message. A brick through my window." She went quiet for a moment, then said softly, They're getting desperate. That means you're closer to something real. I'm tired of being the one they target. I know, she said, but don't let them see that. Document everything, every call, every letter. Don't rely on memory. That advice stayed with me. I bought a small spiral notebook from the store, the kind school kids use. I wrote down the date, the time, the officer's name, and every word from that note. It didn't feel like much, but for the first time, I had control over something. My record, my truth. I flipped through the earlier entries I'd scribbled over the last weeks. The false listing, the lock change, the forged papers. Each line was a wound that no one else seemed to see. But now it was evidence, not emotion. That shift mattered. By noon, I drove to the mechanic to replace the shattered window. The man at the shop whistled softly when he saw the damage. "That wasn't random," he said. "No," I answered. "It wasn't." He gave me a quote, $350. I winced but nodded. I couldn't afford to leave it broken. Vulnerability had a price, and I'd already paid too much. While waiting, I read through my notes again, running my thumb over the pages. Ruth was right. The notebook wasn't just paper, it was armor. Every detail I captured turned fear into fact. Every line I wrote reminded me I still existed, no matter how much they tried to erase me. That night, I parked closer to town, under a working streetlight. The glare was harsh but comforting. I looked at the replacement window and thought of how easy it was to shatter something solid. But I wasn't glass. I was learning to resist, even in small ways. I whispered to myself, "They can break things, not me." When I finally checked the mail the next morning, an envelope with a courthouse seal sat on top of the pile. My heart sank as I tore it open and saw the header. The next day, I got a court notice. She was suing me for harassment. The words didn't feel real at first. I stood there on the courthouse steps, clutching the envelope that carried her name in bold black letters. The seal had already been broken, but I still ran my thumb over it, the paper edges rough against my skin. Inside, the summons called me the respondent. It said I'd defamed her character and caused emotional distress. Reading those lines, I almost laughed. The irony was cruel. She stole my house, and now she wanted to steal my dignity. I sat on the cold stone ledge outside, trying to steady my breathing. The morning air carried that faint courthouse scent, paper, ink, and old air conditioning. The world around me moved fast. Lawyers, secretaries, people holding folders like shields. To them, I was just another case file. To me, this was everything I had left. Ruth met me there. She walked with a cane these days, steady but slow. When she saw my face, she said softly, "They're trying to wear you down." "They already have," I whispered. She shook her head. "No, you're still standing. That's what they hate." We sat there for a while, watching people go in and out. The courthouse clock struck 11, each chime echoing across the square. "You'll countersue," Ruth said finally. "You've got the forged contract, my affidavit, and the notary seal. That's evidence." I nodded, though my stomach turned at the thought of another hearing, another room full of strangers deciding my fate. That night, I spread everything across my kitchen table. Bills, photos, repair receipts, tax forms. The house had drained me for years, yet I'd never asked her for a cent. I'd paid for the roof when it leaked. I'd covered the property taxes even when my savings thinned. Money had always been the weapon she used to humiliate me, and now that same trail of payments might be what saved me. I highlighted every payment record, stapled each document with shaking hands, and labeled them in neat handwriting. Repairs, 2018. Insurance, 2020. Property tax, 2022. The numbers told a story. I couldn't. They proved I'd built that home with sacrifice, not spite. By the next morning, Ruth had arranged for me to meet a legal aid volunteer, Thomas, a retired clerk who still spent his mornings helping people who couldn't afford lawyers. His office was small and cluttered, but there was kindness in his voice. "Don't panic," he said after scanning the papers. "This is a classic countersuit move. They're hoping you'll drop your claim to avoid the stress. "I can't afford another lawyer," I said quietly. He smiled. "Then make truth your lawyer. Bring your documents. Speak plain. Courts like facts, not feelings." I smiled back, but inside I was terrified. The hearing was set for next Thursday, 9 a.m. That date felt carved into my mind like a warning. I wrote it in my notebook, underlined it twice, and taped the notice on my refrigerator door. It was strange how fear could coexist with focus. Every time I passed that paper, I felt the weight of it pull me upright. That weekend, I didn't sleep much. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, hearing the echo of her accusation. Harassment, defamation, damages. Words that didn't belong to me. Each time I'd sit at the table, open my notebook, and reread Ruth's note from earlier chapters of my life. Her reminder, document everything. The truth will stand when memory shakes. By Sunday afternoon, I gathered all my files into a large envelope. I wrote my name across the front in black marker, pressing hard enough to dent the cardboard. When I sealed it, the sound was loud in the quiet house. It felt like sealing years of grief and anger inside one final defense. Monday came with gray clouds and drizzle. I went to the courthouse again to file my response. The clerk looked up from her desk and said, "Are you representing yourself?" "Yes," I answered. "Then make sure you attach your exhibits. The court prefers originals, but copies are fine if certified." I handed her the envelope. For a second, I thought about all the years of silence that led to this moment. How betrayal always starts with trust. When I left the building, I stopped halfway down the steps and looked back. The courthouse loomed behind me, solid and indifferent. Yet somehow, I didn't feel small anymore. I had proof. I had a voice. That night, Ruth called again. "Are you ready for Thursday?" "As ready as I'll ever be." She hesitated. "Don't expect fairness. Expect exposure. That's what hurts them most." Her words settled deep in me. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was chasing clarity, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone else believing you. I stared once more at the court notice on my refrigerator. The ink had smudged slightly where my fingers kept brushing it. I whispered the time under my breath. 9 a.m. It sounded like both a beginning and an ending. When Thursday came, I walked into that courthouse ready to face whatever came next. But she didn't show up. Her lawyer did. Her seat in court was empty. For a moment, I thought I was in the wrong room. The space where she should have been sat hollow and untouched, her nameplate shining under the fluorescent lights. The air inside the courtroom had that still, recycled chill that clung to my skin. The clerk looked uneasy. The judge checked his watch. Then he said flatly, "We'll proceed with your statement." My pulse pounded as I stood. I could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the scrape of my shoes on the floor. I faced the bench, not her. "Your Honor," I began, "my signature was forged. My property was sold without my knowledge while I was under medical care. Since then, I've received threats. A brick through my car window, letters telling me to stop. I've reported every one." Her lawyer rose from his seat, his suit too crisp, his tone too smooth. "Objection, Your Honor. The respondent's claims are speculative." The judge barely glanced at him. "Overruled. Continue." I kept my eyes forward. "I have proof. A forged contract with a fake notary seal, verified by a retired notary public, a police report, and this—" I lifted a folder, my fingers trembling. "Ruth's notarized affidavit confirming the forgery." The lawyer tried again. "Without my client present." "She was notified," the judge cut in. "Proceed." Ruth's voice echoed next. She was sitting just behind me, calm and steady. "The seal used on that contract isn't legitimate," she said. "I issued the real ones for the family estate. That one's been altered." Her words landed like stones, simple, undeniable. The judge nodded. "I'll enter this testimony into the record." Then the sound I'd been waiting for. The gavel striking once. Sharp, clean. The vibration lingered in my chest. For the first time in months, I felt the power tilt, even slightly, in my favor. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded. Cameras, microphones, people holding notepads. I froze at the sight. Ruth whispered, "Someone tipped them off." "They know?" I asked, voice low. She gave a grim nod. "Looks like your sister's absence just made the story bigger." A woman from a local station approached. "Mrs. Hayes, can we get a comment?" I shook my head. No statements. "But the records show your sister didn't appear," she pressed. "Do you think she's hiding?" "Ask her lawyer," I said quietly. "He talks more than she ever does." We made our way down the stairs slowly. The noise from the reporters blurred together, questions about money, betrayal, family. The words stung, not because they were wrong, but because they were suddenly public. What had been humiliation behind closed doors was now a headline. At the bottom of the steps, I saw the courthouse clock strike 2. The chime echoed across the plaza. It reminded me of every afternoon I'd spent managing the estate's bills, the quiet ritual of paying taxes, fixing leaks, keeping order. Every dollar I'd spent to preserve that house had come from years of careful living. And she, my own sister, had signed it away as if it were nothing. Ruth touched my arm. "You held your ground in there." "I didn't win," I said. "Not yet." "No," she replied, "but she lost something today. The room heard you. That matters." We walked to the parking lot in silence. The envelope of court documents felt heavier than ever. I slid it into the glove compartment like it was a living thing that could still bite. I turned the key and stared through the windshield, the courthouse shrinking in the mirror. At home, I brewed tea and sat by the window, trying to absorb what had happened. For the first time, I felt the edges of fear loosen, replaced by something steadier, resolve. I wasn't powerless anymore. The truth had been spoken under oath, and even if justice took its time, it had finally entered the record. As the sun dipped low, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, calls, notifications. I ignored them until the evening news rolled on the TV in the background. Ruth's voice, my photo, the courthouse, all flashing on screen. The caption read, "Local woman fights sister over family property fraud." I stared at it, stunned. The story that had been buried inside family whispers was now public, impossible to hide again. I wasn't sure whether to feel relief or dread. By evening, our faces were on local news. They called me the crazy widow on camera. The headline ran all morning, flashing between weather updates and traffic reports. The anchor smiled as if she were talking about a celebrity scandal, not a life torn apart. I sat on the couch, coffee gone cold in my hand, watching myself speak words I hadn't said in that order. They had edited my interview, cut out the parts about the forged contract, the threats, the nights spent in my car. What was left sounded like hysteria. The host's voice was smooth and practiced. "She claims her sister stole her home after her husband's death," she said, smiling into the lens. "But court records show disputes over inheritance for years. Some neighbors describe her as emotional, even unstable." Then they showed my photo, eyes tired, mouth half open, caught mid-sentence. I turned the TV off, but the silence afterward felt louder than the broadcast. That afternoon, when I went to buy groceries, people stared. One woman whispered something to another near the dairy aisle. A man who used to nod at me near the post office looked away. I realized then that a reputation can vanish faster than property. I called Ruth. "They twisted everything," I said. "I saw," she replied. "They're testing your resolve. Don't take the bait." "How am I supposed to fight what's already on TV?" "By standing still. Truth takes its time, remember?" Her voice steadied me for a moment, but when I hung up, the ache returned. I turned the television back on, not out of masochism, but because I needed to see what they were building. And there she was, Claire, sitting across from the same host, wearing that calm smile she always used before a lie. "She's grieving," Claire said sweetly. Ever since my brother-in-law passed, she's been fragile. We've tried to help her, but she refuses reason. The host nodded, sympathetic. Do you think she's mentally fit to handle legal affairs? Claire hesitated just long enough for the implication to stick. I don't think she understands how far she's gone. I wanted to throw something at the screen. Instead, I pressed my palms together and whispered, Not this time. By evening, the calls began. Numbers I didn't recognize. Some people cursed. Others offered pity. I stopped answering. Each voicemail sounded like judgment wearing politeness. Even the mail turned cruel. Unsigned notes, one with the words, "Seek help," scrawled in blue ink. That night, Ruth came over uninvited. She found me sitting in the dark, the glow of the muted TV painting the room in shifting light. "Turn it off," she said gently. "I want to see how much damage she's done." "Enough," Ruth said, "but they overplayed their hand. Public cruelty always turns on itself." I sighed. "They called me crazy, Ruth." She pulled up a chair. "Then let them. Crazy people don't keep records, or notarize seals, or court summonses. You do. That's your shield." I nodded, but the sting stayed. Later, around 9, I sat at my kitchen table sorting papers again. Bills, reports, the affidavit, all in neat stacks. Money was running thin. The lawyer I'd hoped to hire never called back after the broadcast. He probably didn't want to risk his firm's image. So it would be me again, alone at that courtroom table. I checked my notebook and wrote the date of the next hearing, Wednesday, 10 a.m., underlined twice. At midnight, I replayed the interview one last time. Every lie, every false smile. I noticed something new. When Claire mentioned my husband's death, she looked down, not with sadness, but calculation. It was a tell. I paused the frame there, the way a detective might study a scene. That clip, twisted as it was, proved something real. The mask she wore wasn't flawless. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The headlines online had shifted slightly. A new version appeared. Sister at center of property feud, may skip final hearing. Beneath it, an update quoted the court clerk. Judge orders both parties to appear in person next week. I set my coffee down and felt my pulse steady. The tide was turning again. They had tried humiliation, lies, and intimidation. Now they'd have to stand beside me, face to face, no cameras, no editing. I whispered to myself, they can frame me however they want, but they can't rewrite the record. And when I stepped outside, the morning air felt different, like the truth was beginning to breathe again. The judge demanded both sisters appear in person. She finally walked in, smiling. It wasn't the nervous kind of smile people wear in court. It was confident, polished, like she'd already written her version of the ending. The moment she stepped through those doors, the air in the room seemed to tighten. I could hear the soft whir of the ceiling fan, the faint creak of the judge's chair as he glanced at her and then back to me. Ruth was beside me, quiet, her hands folded over the small recorder she'd brought. The judge cleared his throat. "Let's begin." His tone carried that deliberate calm only years on the bench can teach. Claire's lawyer started first, going through a rehearsed argument about family misunderstandings and grief, about property confusion and emotional instability. I'd heard it all before. But today I wasn't here to defend feelings. I was here to present proof. When it was my turn, I stood up slowly. My knees trembled, but my voice didn't. "Your Honor," I said, "before I speak, I have one recording to submit." I nodded to Ruth. She opened her purse and took out the recorder. The silver device looked small, almost harmless, yet it held everything. The judge motioned for the bailiff to collect it. "What does it contain?" he asked. "My phone conversation with the respondent," I said. "She identifies herself and discusses the property sale." Claire's lawyer frowned. "This is highly irregular." The judge raised a hand. "If it's relevant, we'll hear it." The bailiff pressed play. At first, just static. Then my voice. Calm, steady. "Why'd you do it, Claire?" Her reply filled the room. too clear to deny. I just needed the money before you wasted it. Every sound afterward felt magnified, the low buzz of the speaker, the shuffle of papers, the sharp inhale from someone in the back row. Claire's smile faltered. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering fast, but it was useless. The words were already public record. The judge let the silence stretch before speaking. "That's quite an admission." I could barely breathe. My hands gripped the edge of the table. Ruth reached over and touched my sleeve. Steady, grounding. Claire spoke then, her voice cracking for the first time. "I was angry. She was never supposed to—" The judge interrupted. "Save it. You've had your chance." He turned his attention to the clerk. "Please note that the recording is entered as evidence. The forged documents are invalid. Property ownership returns to the petitioner." Then he paused, as if weighing something heavier than paperwork. "And this court recommends review of potential perjury." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead a deep calm spread through me, like air finally reaching a room sealed too long. Claire's lawyer tried one last objection, but even he looked relieved when the judge overruled it. The gavel came down, once, firm, echoing through the wood panels. Ruth leaned closer. "It's over," she whispered. I shook my head softly. "No, it's just finally fair." Afterward, as we gathered our things, the judge looked at me. "Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly, "I hope this helps you move forward." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said, though my voice trembled. "It's not about winning. I just needed to be heard." He gave a small nod. "That's justice, too." Outside, the sun was sharp against the courthouse glass. Reporters waited again, their microphones angled like weapons. Ruth shielded me with her arm and murmured, "Keep walking." I did. My steps felt lighter, not because the weight had vanished, but because it was finally shared by the truth. Halfway down the steps, I saw her. Claire stood near the curb, surrounded by people who had once defended her. None spoke. The smile she wore that morning was gone, replaced by something smaller, recognition, maybe shame. She looked at me, just once, as if waiting for some last exchange, a line that could rewrite what she'd done. But I had nothing left to give her. I'd said all that mattered under oath. The crowd parted between us, and I kept walking toward the car. Ruth unlocked the door, and I sank into the seat, exhaling for the first time in months. Through the window, I caught one last glimpse of her reflection in the courthouse glass, standing still, eyes lowered, as if the mirror refused to meet her anymore. Outside, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her friends vanished faster than her lies. It didn't happen overnight. At first, they defended her online, saying the media twisted things, that family business should stay private. But when the court ruling hit the local papers, their voices faded. One by one, their posts disappeared. The realtor who brokered the sale deleted his page. The agency issued a formal apology, short, cautious, but public. It was strange seeing justice move, not through laws, but through silence. That week, my mailbox filled with envelopes addressed to current resident. Junk ads, utilities, small bills, nothing personal. For the first time in years, there were no threats, no warnings, no accusations, just quiet. I stood at the end of the driveway, looking at the empty street, and thought about how peace could sound almost lonely. Ruth called later that afternoon. "They're turning on her," she said. "I didn't want that," I replied. "I know, but truth has a cost. Sometimes it's friendship." The house looked different in the daylight, less like a battleground, more like a place again. I repainted the mailbox, cleaned the porch railings, even fixed the loose board she used to trip on. It felt like reclaiming something small, but sacred. Every nail, every brushstroke reminded me I had survived not only deceit, but the slow humiliation that came after. By Friday, the local community page buzzed again. This time, it wasn't about me. Someone had posted screenshots of her earlier comments, comparing them to the court transcript. "Liar" appeared more than once in the comments. I scrolled without satisfaction. It didn't feel like victory, just the inevitable settling of dust. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the trees, I brought in the last of the folded receipts Ruth had helped me organize. I filed them neatly in the cabinet marked Estate Final. It wasn't revenge, it was documentation, proof that my name, my ownership, my integrity had been restored. I'd lost money in legal fees, more than I could afford, but I'd kept my home. That was enough. Around 8, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was dim, street lamps flickering one by one. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and fell silent. The world had gone still again, like it was waiting for something new to begin. I let that silence stay, not afraid of it anymore. Ruth texted me a photo later, my name under the owner's sign she'd repainted for me while I was at court. "Thought it deserved fresh color," she wrote. I smiled. I walked outside, mounted the sign where it belonged, and stepped back. It caught the faint glow of the porch light, and for the first time, it looked right. I thought about all the months of chaos, the forged papers, the lawsuits, the headlines. Every piece had fallen back into place, but none of it could undo what was lost between us. Still, standing there, I realized I didn't need her apology. I just needed my ground, my space, my quiet. When I turned to go inside, I noticed the mailbox flag raised. Strange, I hadn't sent anything. Inside was a single envelope, handwriting I knew too well. My chest tightened before I even touched it. Then came her letter. She asked for forgiveness and half the sale money. The letter came in plain stationery, no return address, just my name written in the same shaky hand I'd seen on Christmas cards years ago. The paper felt rough between my fingers, still faintly scented with the perfume she used to wear. I stood by the mailbox for a long minute before opening it. The air was still, heavy, like it knew something familiar was about to start again. Her handwriting wavered in places, but the words were clear enough. "I've lost everything. You've taken it all from me. If you have any heart left, send me half the proceeds. I'm tired of fighting. I only want peace." She ended it with, "Your sister," as if that title alone should undo everything that came before. I read it twice, then folded it back carefully. It was strange how her voice could still find its way under my skin, even through ink and paper. But this time, I didn't feel anger, just a deep, quiet sadness. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it while the clock ticked toward noon. The same clock that used to hang in our parents' house, the one I'd inherited because no one else wanted it. Its steady rhythm had become my reminder that time moves on, no matter who stays stuck. Ruth came by later that afternoon. I handed her the letter without a word. She read it slowly, her face tightening. "She's still trying," she said finally. "Always will," I replied. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing she expects." We both laughed softly, though it wasn't funny. I poured us tea, my hands steady this time. There was no debate left inside me. I'd already learned that peace doesn't come from returning pain. It comes from refusing to keep it alive. After Ruth left, I sat on the porch with the letter again. The edges had started to curl slightly from my grip. I placed it on a metal tray, struck a match, and watched the flame catch. The ink darkened, then lifted into smoke. The air smelled faintly of burnt paper, and something older, like the past leaving for good. She had written about needing money, about losing her friends, her business, her name. She said she didn't mean for things to go this far. The irony made me shake my head. Every step she took had been her choice. I'd stopped trying to make sense of her reasons long ago. The paper folded inward, curling into itself until only the corners glowed. I whispered quietly, "Forgiveness isn't a door, it's a fence." That sentence stayed with me. For years, I believed love meant always opening the door, always giving one more chance. But love can also mean distance. Love can be boundaries that protect what's still standing. That was something she never understood, maybe never could. By the time the last bit of ash fell into the tray, the wind had shifted. I took a deep breath and let the smoke drift upward. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like truth finally cooling. I brought the tray to the porch railing and tapped the ash out carefully. Tiny flecks floated into the air, vanishing into the evening light. I thought of all the versions of myself she had tried to rewrite. The desperate one, the unstable one, the fool who'd sign anything for peace. All gone now, like that paper. Inside, I poured another cup of tea and sat at the table. The house was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not the kind that waits for someone to speak, but the kind that belongs to you. I glanced once more at the empty tray, then whispered the same promise I'd made the night I filed my first report months ago: never let anyone write my story for me again. Outside, the smoke was gone. Only the faint gray dust remained, settling into the cracks of the porch boards, the same boards I'd repaired myself. The ash settled, and I finally felt home again. I turned the light on for myself this time. The bulb flickered once, then held steady, casting a soft glow over the porch. I stood there for a moment, hand still on the switch, realizing how long it had been since this house felt like mine. The quiet hum of morning filled the space. No tension, no voices arguing in the background, just calm. Inside, the new certificate hung straight on the wall, framed and clean. The ink on the reinstatement stamp was still dark, the date still fresh. I ran my hand across the glass and whispered, "It's real this time." It wasn't about the paper itself, it was what it meant. No more threats, no more lawyers, no more waiting for the next twist. I brewed coffee, slow and unhurried. The smell drifted through the kitchen, mixing with sunlight spilling across the counter. I pulled my favorite cup from the cabinet, the one with the chip on the rim, and smiled. That cup had survived everything. So had I. Around 9, Ruth stopped by. "You're up early," she said, stepping inside. "Couldn't sleep," I told her. "Good reason or bad?" "Good," I said, handing her a cup. "For once, good." She looked around the kitchen, her eyes landing on the certificate. "So it's official?" "It's official," I said. "And quiet." "Quiet's underrated," she replied. We sat by the window, sipping in silence. Outside, the porch railing gleamed from the fresh coat of paint I'd done the day before. It had taken 2 coats and half a can, but it was worth every minute. For months, that porch had been my witness, the place where I cried, argued, waited for mail that broke me. Now it held nothing but light. After Ruth left, I walked through each room slowly. The living room no longer echoed her laughter or the sting of our last argument. The walls didn't carry her voice anymore. They carried mine. I'd patched holes, replaced curtains, scrubbed away stains I didn't realize had lingered. Restoration isn't just repair. It's permission. To start again without apology. Near the doorway hung the spare key rack. Only one key now. My key. I traced the hook where hers used to hang and thought of the line I'd said months ago. I trusted my sister with the keys to my home. That trust wasn't gone. It had just changed shape. It had turned inward. By noon, the sun reached across the yard, and I stepped out onto the porch again. The street was quiet, kids walking to school, a mail truck passing by. Normal. I hadn't felt normal in so long it felt almost new. I sat with my coffee, legs tucked under the chair, listening to the world move without needing to join it. There was no letter to dread, no verdict to fear. Just this, my house, my silence, my mourning. I realized something simple but heavy. Forgiveness didn't erase the damage. It just made space for peace to grow where bitterness used to live. That was enough. When the cup was empty, I stood, set it on the railing, and turned toward the door. The key fit easily, no resistance, no jam. Before stepping inside, I looked back once more at the light glowing gently above the porch. The same one I'd once left burning for her, hoping she'd come home. Now it burned for me. Home is mine again, finally. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city, You're listening from I Read Every Comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story, with respect and gratitude.